Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Om Shri Hanuma Bhima Madhvantargata Ramakrishna Veda Vyasatmaka Lakshmi Hayagrivaya Namaha. Namaskara of Srinivasan Pranesh to all Sajjanas. We are now into 13th part or 13th episode of the series of discourses done under the title Vedas and Unbiased View. So now we have proceeded to discuss the various possible defects in the instruments of knowledge, that is, possible defects in perception, inference, and agama. So in the previous episode, we went through pratyaksha and the possible defects in pratyaksha, that is, direct perception and the possible defects in it. So the definition of pratyaksha is defectless contact between the senses and the object of knowledge. So when we said defectless contact, that means that we have stressed the point that it should be defectless, which means there are some possible defects. So we discussed about those possible defects in the previous session, like the object of knowledge being too long from us at a long distance. The Himalayan mountain, Meru mountain were all given as examples, and the object of knowledge is too close to us, like our eyelids, and very tiny or minute, or there may be obstructions to perceive, as in the case of a pot behind a wall that we couldn't see, and mixing of similar substances where we saw the mixing of milk and water as example. Then being non-manifested, that is a part in the darkness, and similarity or sadrushya. So all these things we have seen as the possible defects in pratyaksha. So now let us proceed to anumana, inference, or reasoning. So the definition of anumana is nirdosha upapattihi anumanam. That means the defect-free reasoning is called anumana or inference. So here we already went through that in case of anumana, the vyapti or the connection should qualify. So we also took an example and smoke and the fire, where there is a invariable connection between the smoke and the fire, where the smoke will not exist without fire. So here Vyapti will qualify under three conditions. So one is called Bhuyo Darshana. That means repeated experience. So we went through that inference has to be either supported by Pratyaksha or Agama. So in this example that we have taken, so there have to be support from our sensual experience or direct perception. So that is what we say, where means I have seen the smoke where there was fire in my kitchen, in the cremation ground while doing a fire ritual, and so there are so many repeated experiences like this which confirms the connection between the smoke and the fire. And the second condition is there shouldn't be any contradicting experience. That is, one should not show a case where the existence of smoke is possible without fire. Then the inference will not qualify. So repeated experience, absence of contradicting experience, and the third one is no third party involvement. There shouldn't be any third party involvement which projects some connection to us when there is no real connection. So all these three things have to be taken care. Now under Anumana, lot of things have been discussed in Pramana Paddhati and in the Grantha Pramana Lakshana. So Anumana is a very big topic. Inference is not so easy to cover, and it is not very short. There are a lot of discussions, lot of debates. So I fear If we proceed to explain each and everything in the Pramana Paddhati about Anumana, then we may have to pass through maybe 5 or 6 more episodes. So, which will not be of interest to people. And as I told already, the discussion about Pramanas is to give a basic knowledge required for the title Vedas and Unbiased view. The objective is not to explain the Pramana Paddhati in its entirely. So I'm briefing only certain portions of Anumana Pramana as given in the Pramana Paddhati, and there are a lot more to discuss. Maybe we can have it as a separate session. I mean, whatever portions have to be elaborately discussed in Pramana Paddhati can be had in a separate discourse for the interested people. And in this series of discourse, let me restrict only to briefing of the inference, and then proceed through the defects in Agama in the next session. And then let us start with the real core or heart of the topic, the Vedas and unbiased view. So now, Anumana or inference is classified into various types. There are different aspects or perspectives. So in one of the perspectives, the Anumana can be classified as Karya Anumana, Karana Anumana, and Akarya Karana Anumana. So Karya means effect. So there have to be some cause for every effect, and based on the effect, we do the inference here. So that is called Karya Anumana. That is inference based on the effect. Let us take the same example, that is the smoke. With the help of smoke, we infer fire. So when a wooden log or something is fired, so because of the fire, the smoke arises. Smoke comes out. Based on this smoke, especially when we are unable to perceive the fire, for example, in the distant hill, we see the smoke, but we couldn't see the fire. So there, based on the smoke, we infer the presence of fire. So fire is the cause here, and smoke is the effect. So based on the effect, we infer the cause. So that is called Karya Anumana. So why don't we have it in vice versa? Actually, can't this be Karana Anumana? Can't we say based on fire the smoke can be inferred? If we are questioned in that way, then no, because one reason is fire is not the only cause of smoke. That means wherever you have fire, you should see the smoke. That is not the case here. Take for example the LPG. That is a clean fuel, so you can see the fire, but there is no smoke. And let us say we heat some iron rod or something, then there is not smoke found there. So there are cases where the fire is present and smoke is absent. So here it cannot be based on the cause. And the smoke, fire is not the only cause of the smoke. Say for example, we take a wooden log and we fire it. So the smoke is produced because of the water content in the wooden log. So that is also a cause here. So in case we do a cause-based Anumana or Karana-based Anumana, then the Karana has to be considered in totality. Actually, the fire is not the only cause of smoke. So here it will be appropriate only when we do Karya Anumana, that is based on the smoke, we have to infer the fire, and it is not vice versa. And the second type we listed is Karana Anumana. Karana means cause. Karya means effect. Karana means cause. So Karana Anumana, based on the cause, we infer the effect. We infer something based on the cause. Let us take, for example, the highly dense and dark clouds. So when we see these dark clouds, obviously even a child of 5-6 years old can very easily say that it is going to rain, because the clouds are very dark, and based on our past experience, we had the repeated experience in this case. We have to note that in every case, the repeated experience supports here. The repeated experience in our perception, sensual perception from our own experience supports here. So the repeated experience only strengthens the anumana. I mean the perception based anumana. Means the anumana that takes support from the perception. So in Karana Anumana, we see that when we see the dark clouds, so we infer that we are going to get rain. Rain is going to pour. And this is based on our past experience, because in every instance when we saw similar highly thick and dark clouds, so we had rain in the past. This is our repeated experience. So this is one type of anumana. And the third type is akarya karana anumana. That is inferencing something, inferring something without any casual connection. That is, for example, this is also called we say rasa rupa anumana. That is based on the taste and form. To give an example, let us take a mango. So based on the color of mango, we see the color of mango. So it is very, very bright yellow in color. So then we infer that the fruit is ripe enough to be consumed and it will taste good. Whereas when we see the mango in a greenish color, very dark green in color, then we infer that it is a raw mango. It is not a ripe fruit. And the taste also differs based on that stage of mango. So this is one type of inference. So based on one kind of perception about the anumana, means based on one perspective, sorry, not perception, based on one kind of perspective. So the anumana is classified as karya anumana, karana anumana, akarya karana anumana. And based on the other perspective, from other perspective, it is classified into two. That is drishtam and samanyato drishtam. Drishtam means the perceived inference. That is as in the case of fire and the smoke. That is a perceived inference. So samanyato drishtam means generally perceived inference. Something means something not from a direct specific perception. So in case of smoke and fire, it is direct. In this case, in the generally perceived inference, so we can give an example of a person being tested for color blindness. So we cannot directly look into the eyes and say whether the person has got a color blindness or not. So it is based on some tests. So the person is allowed to perceive the colors, and the doctor may ask him to say what color he sees when it is shown. And if the person rightly points out the colors, that is, if he says the right colors, then it means his vision is good. He doesn't have color blindness. So this is a kind of inference where it is not pretty direct as in the case of smoke and fire, but it is a generally perceived inference. It is not very specific. Then there is a third perspective about the inference based on which again it is classified. So the first type is sadhana anumana. So sadhana anumana means we are trying to establish something. Inference that establishes a case, we can say. For example, we can say the same fire and smoke. So inferring the presence of fire through the knowledge of smoke and the connection between the smoke and the fire. So here we try to establish our view. That is sadhana anumana. Similarly, the second type of anumana is called dushana anumana. Dushana Anumana. That means inference that refutes the case of the opponent. In the first type, we try to establish our case. We try to prove something through the inference. Here, we are trying to disprove the opponent through our inference. So that is further classified into two types. One type is called Dushti Pramiti Sadhanam, where we straight away disprove the opponent's views. The Dushana Anumana itself aims at refutation of the opponent. Under that, there are two types. One is Dushti Pramiti Sadhanam, where that we disprove the opponent's view. And the second category is called Tarka. That is for whatever argument done by the opponent, we do a counterfactual reasoning, and that is called Tarka. So this is further explained in detail in Pramana Paddhati, and the opponents like Nayayikas are debated. Their views are considered, and they are debated, and there are several sub-classifications under the headings. I'm not proceeding to explain everything here. So as I told already, I'm just trying to brief Anumana and the defects in it, because we have to enter into the core of the topic. We are in the 13th part, and we are still going through the Pramana Paddhati. It is not irrelevant to the topic, but that is not the exact topic also. So let me conclude with a brief note in such episodes. Now, we said the defectless reasoning is Anumana. Defectless Upapatti is Anumana. So that means there are possible defects in Anumana as well. So what are those defects? First of all, how can we define a defect in Anumana means? How the defect occurs. If we look into that, then defects occur where the reasoning does not cause any true cognition, but instead causes a doubt or error. So we already went through two types of jnana or knowledge. One is the yathartha jnana, and the other one is ayathartha jnana. Under the ayathartha jnana, we went through doubts and errors. Okay, the samshaya viparya. So now, defect in Anumana means the purpose of Anumana as Pramana is to bring us the true knowledge, that is the Yathartha Jnana. So where it does not become a cause of Yathartha Jnana, instead the reasoning becomes a cause of Ayathartha Jnana, that is a doubt or error, then that is the defect in Anumana. In short, we can say that is an whatever is an obstacle to get the Yathartha Jnana, that is the defect in Anumana. So such defects are classified into two types. So one is Artha Dosha and the other one is Vachana Dosha. So Artha Dosha means defects directly attached to the reasoning. The reason. So in under Artha Dosha, we have two types. I will come to that. So Vachana Dosha means the defects in speech or the expression. So now Artha Dosha, that is the defects that are directly attached to the reason. Under that, we have two subtypes. So one is called Virodha. These words could have been seen even in the colloquial language. For example, even in our Kannada or Tamil language, any language, we use such words actually. These are basically from Sanskrit. So Virodham, we say in Tamil. So Virodha means contradiction actually. So example, if somebody infers that the fire is cold because it falls under the category of matter, then there is a defect in it, because fire is never cold, fire is always hot. So such an inference fails. That does not give Yathartha Jnana. So this is a contradiction actually. This is called Virodha. And the second type is Asangati. That means inappropriateness. So when we say inappropriate, then there is no point in further inquiring that. So which does not have inappropriateness is something which does not have any further scope for inquiry or jigyasa. For example, how do we say, how do we give an example for appropriateness where it leads to some kind of inquiry? So the example given in the book is, let us say there is a person named Devadatta. So to Devadatta, we say the cows. That means, so what is to be done with the cows? So it gives place for the further inquiry. And when we say shall be brought here, that means the cows shall be brought here. When we say the cows, it gives place for further inquiry. And when we say shall be brought here, then it completes the sentence. It completes the inquiry and makes a complete meaning that the cows should be brought here. So now, where the cases are not like this, that means the cases where there is no room for further inquiry, that is the inappropriateness, such thing is called asangati. That means there is no room for further inquiry. That's it. We can give a lot of examples for that also. So it's not a big deal. So now under artha dosha, we have two categories. One is the viroda and the second one is asangati. So we went through that. Now we say vachana dosha. Vachana dosha means the dosha. Dosha means defect. So it is the defect in speech or expression. So under that there are two types. One type is called nyuna and the other type is called adhika. So nyuna means incompleteness, or we can say the omission of something that has to be essentially present. For example, let us say because of the smoke on the mountain. So if there is such statement, then what do we do based on that? The important factor that has to be present to make the complete sentence is absent here. So the incompleteness or the omission of the essential things to be present in a statement, the absence or the lack or the omission of the essential things in a statement is called nyuna. Next one is adhika. So nyuna means lack of something. Something is not present. Whereas adhika means unnecessary addition, usage of words that are not necessary and gives misleading meanings. So whatever vachana we say, that has to be perfect. It should not be more, it should not be less. That has to be exact and convey the meaning that it has to convey. So in case it lacks something, that then it falls under the nyuna category. And if something is told in addition unnecessarily, that will make us to mislead the meaning, then that is called adhika. Say for example, when somebody is asked for their name and they say their father's name also along with it, then people get confused on what is his name. This is a misleading factor. You take in my case itself. So my name is Srinivasan and my father's name is Pranesh. But the problem is in India, Srinivasan is a very, very, very common name, and we can find 3 or 4 Srinivasan in every street actually. That is a very, very common name. And to my surprise, when I studied +2, I used to write my initials. I used to write P. Srinivasan. I am Pranesh Srinivasan. Pranesh is my father's name. I used to write P. Srinivasan. And I had another friend whose initial is also P. He is also called P. Srinivasan. I think, if I remember correctly, his father's name is Padmanabhan or something. So both are P. Srinivasan. The initials are also same, and that led to a lot of confusions. So I thought it is always better to give the full name. Again, there is a confusion. Whenever we fill the form, when they ask first name, last name, leave the middle name. Most of us don't fill that. When they ask the first name and last name, in different geographies, it is told in different ways. in Indian tradition, I should name myself as Pranesh Srinivasan. That is, my name should come after my father's name. But I have named myself as Srinivasan Pranesh. That is a big story actually. I was using only my initial as P. I used to write P Srinivasan. That is how it is still in the bank records and everywhere. But in between, the government said the names should match between the Aadhaar, PAN card, and everything. So in PAN card, the name was full name, and in Aadhaar, it was just with the initial or something. So there is some kind of mismatch. So I somehow made my name as Srinivasan Pranesh. So giving the full name is always a confusion in our country and as well as outside. So now, when somebody knows me very well, now I used to tell my name as Srinivasan Pranesh, but my name is only Srinivasan. Pranesh is my father's name. His name is actually Coimbatore Madhavarao Hari Mukhya Pranesh. That is a very big name. There was no sufficient space in the school records to write this, so they made it as CMHM Pranesh. So his name is Pranesh and my name is Srinivasan. People who know me very well, they call me by the name Srinivasan because they know that. So let us assume I am going to a new person, and when somebody asks my name and I say I should say Srinivasan, then they will understand that as my name. But when I say my name as Srinivasan Pranesh, then they get a confusion. It is misleading. They get a confusion whether my name is Srinivasan or Pranesh. There are some people who call me by the name Pranesh. I don't usually say anything because they call me after my father, so I don't say that. But my name is actually Srinivasan. So why I am saying is, this is an example where unnecessary addition of words in a statement that is misleading. So this can be given as an example for adhika. So if we look into the classifications, then from one perspective, the Anumana is classified as Karya Anumana, Karana Anumana, and Akarya Karana Anumana. And from the second perspective, it is classified as Dushtam, Samanyato Dushtam. And from the third perspective, it is classified as Sadhana Anumanam, Dushana Anumanam. Dushana Anumana is again classified into two types, that is Dushti Pramiti Sadhanam and Tarka. These are with respect to the classification of Anumana. So now coming into the defects of Anumana or the defects in Upapatti. So there are two types. One is Artha Dosha and the other one is Vachara Dosha. Under Artha Dosha, we have Virodha and Asangati, whereas under Vachara Dosha, we have Nyuna and Adhika. So this much is the brief about the Anumana and the possible defects in the Upapatti or reasoning or Anumana, whatever we can say. All are synonymous. So as I said already, this further branches into several discussions, and opponents' views are also taken and refuted here in Pramana Paddhati. So if I proceed to say everything in brief, even in brief, if I proceed to say everything, then we may need 5 or 6 more episodes. So I don't want to drag this topic further. I wish to quickly get into the real core or heart of the topic, Vedas and unbiased view based on a grantha named Vishnu Tattva Vinirnaya. But these are basics and foundations, so these should be known, because anything that we try to prove or establish, it is based on the pramanas. So we have to know what is the pramana, or Yathartha Jnana is the pramana that we have seen already, and what are the instruments of knowledge, that is also called pramana or anupramana. The first type, that is the knowledge, true knowledge, is called Kevala Pramana. Instruments of knowledge is called Anupramana. And under the instruments of knowledge, we have 3 types. One is the perception, second is inference, and third is Agama or the scriptures. Scriptures means primarily the Vedas. We will come to that. What are all the categories that fall under this Agama? But primarily the Vedas, and anything that does not contradict with the Vedas. So then we proceeded to define every instrument of knowledge with the word defectless, defectless, defectless. So that means there are possible defects in these, And now we are going through the defects. We went through the defects in perception. In this episode, we went through the possible defects in Anumana, and in the next session, we will be going through the possible defects in the Agama, and then we will proceed into the real topic. So, with this, let me conclude this episode. Thank you for patiently listening to all these parts so far. It might have been, you might have felt that this is very technical, but this is still the foundation and have to be essentially known, and that is why it is covered. So with this, let us conclude this episode. Sarvam Sri Krishna Arpanamastu.